The video game industry is rapidly changing in 2025. We're seeing it happen in real time with these mass layoffs at major publishers like Microsoft. Entire studios at giant companies are shutting down. Amazon essentially shuttered their video game division. The AAA video game industry, it's at a crossroads. No one knows exactly how to move forward. And unfortunately, single-player games have become very low priority for a lot of developers, and I think we need to talk about why. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, that's what we're going to do. We're asking the question, why do AAA publishers hate single-player games? The video game industry is exactly that. It's an industry that produces over $50 billion in annual revenue, but growth has stalled since 2021. Games are still making a truly absurd amount of money, but the attention economy is fickle, and publishers want more than your $70. They want your money forever. Every company looks at financial successes like Fortnite and drools. These people want a piece of that very, very big pie. If you're a business executive, you see Fortnite's estimated $3 billion per year, and you think to yourself,
"Look what I found in my pocket! Look!"
How hard could it be to copy their success? But we've seen time and time again that the live service model comes with a host of unforeseen challenges. Single-player games might be really difficult to make and require years of expensive development time, but it's also really safe compared to the muddy waters of live service. It seems like a no-brainer to develop games that are guaranteed to be profitable, but to a big publisher, even a successful single-player game doesn't bring in enough revenue. A game you can purchase and play can never compare to a forever game like Fortnite. Everyone wants a piece of Fortnite. And nothing against Fortnite. Fortnite, Roblox, and to a lesser extent, even the Steam platform are all examples of what big publishers truly want. They don't want to make games. They want to buy a spot in the video game market where they can sit and collect rent forever. It's real estate, baby. Not free real estate, though. Yeah, I'm sorry, Tim Heidecker meme, but it's not free. Services like Steam are perpetual money machines without the inherent risk of video game development. There's a big reason we haven't seen Half-Life 3. Valve makes too much money. From a monetary perspective, they're interested in diversions like Dota or the Foundry spin-off card game because those are forever games with infinite cash potential. Like, you only have to build the apartment building once. If by some miracle the tenants stay there forever, that's great. They pay you every month until you're dead and you no longer have to think about it. If they don't stay, new tenants will come in and do the same thing. But even more so, they have Steam. If they wanted to just offload Dota or Foundry, it doesn't matter. Like, they collect the money off of other people making games and selling the games. Valve never has to make another game again, and they will forever be the biggest name in the PC gaming business. It's that simple. And all of these services and the individual service games vary in quality, and I'm not saying that they're bad. Certainly not at all. Steam is a great platform. It has its problems, but it does what it does probably better than anybody. And Fortnite does what we'll want out of Fortnite as well. These are the top tier services to emulate, but publishers seem to think that copying these things is easy and that there's room for more than one. Frankly, we have seen how difficult the live service model really is time and time again. Destiny 2 is the biggest example of a modern live service game, a forever game with microtransactions and constant new content. It's a mill meant to keep players engaged, and that isn't always fun. Even fans will say they're putting in the hours. It's a job. Live service games live and breathe on FOMO, and they put timers on their content. The Battle Pass is such a ubiquitous concept, and it's the true marketing genius of Fortnite. It doesn't ruin the game experience for people who don't want to engage with it, but those on the fence are forced to engage with the Battle Pass because it's a limited time event. They're afraid of missing out, maybe missing that new cool skin that will never be available again if you don't earn it now. It's a devious tactic that's being used literally everywhere in the industry. Honestly, you can't even hardly fault it. If the game is a forever game, you need to have something that has some kind of scarcity. I am not saying I like it, but I get it. Before Battle Passes, we had loot boxes and online multiplayer passes and map packs. The age of the map pack, of course, long past, and maybe we're better off for it. One way we're not better off is the glut of live service games that are in development now. There are some amazing standout examples like Helldivers 2 or the the finals that deliver tons of fun without feeling like a literal job. I mean, if you don't care about failing major orders in Helldivers 2. We don't, but there's too many games in development that they just have no way that they will ever be successful. Single-player games have a chance at being mildly successful, even very successful, but live service games, more often than not, will crash and burn immediately. Take Concord, for example. This game reportedly had a massive budget of hundreds of millions of dollars, and it shut down within 2 weeks of launching. It wasn't just a huge financial failure, it was also a complete embarrassment for Sony. Somehow this was a first-party published game that absolutely no one wanted. Sony, actually, they're the current leader in live service announcements that no one wants. As part of a massive live service push by former Sony Interactive Entertainment CEO Jim Ryan, the company purchased Bungie, the developers of Destiny 2 and the original developers of Halo, for $3.6 billion. For perspective, Disney bought Star Wars for $4 billion. Now, I understand that $400 million is an obscene amount of money, more money than I will ever see, certainly. But if your purchase of the Destiny 2 developers puts you in the neighborhood of Star Wars, something is wrong. Like, according to Sony, post-Halo, Bungie is worth just shy of what Star Wars is worth. It's just the most baffling decision. One of the most baffling in video game history. It was part of Sony's strategy to develop 12 new live service games by 2026. As of writing, 8 of those live service games have been canceled. That includes a God of War live service game, a Spider-Man live service game, a Last of Us live service game, and I don't know the other ones, but I'm sure that if they touched any major franchises, they also would have been embarrassments. How would those games work as multiplayer games you play with friends? You know what? I asked that question not wanting to know the answer. I don't want to know the answer to that question. I just don't. And you know what? Here's another dumb thing. You know how many Fortnites there are? There's one. Epic Games owns it, and they don't try to make another Fortnite. Sony was trying to make 12 things. They were seriously trying to make 12. Like, these games historically struggle with attracting players. Even like the biggest names, they have to attract players away from other games, the biggest games they're already playing. And Sony planned on competing with itself 12 times over, assuming one of those games was successful. In their minds, it was worth it to try to fragment the market with 11 other entries. I just can't imagine that working. Like, even if one of them was a wild success, how would you possibly think any of the others wouldn't just harm your successful one? Helldivers 2 is one of the few successes Sony's had with the live service experiment, and thankfully it seems like they're winding down the idea as like a big initiative. Jim Ryan left the company in 2024, and his bad ideas, unfortunately, like, you make decisions at that level and they affect the video game division for a while. It's a year later, and they're just finally kind of getting out of his decisions. Other big publishers have different ideas on how they're going to rent-seek. Microsoft is seemingly dropping the hardware business entirely to focus on a subscription model, which has been both great and terrible for single-player games. The Xbox Game Pass needs a constant supply of new games to keep players interested, so Microsoft purchased way too many game studios. Too many to handle, as a matter of fact, because that's the reason Microsoft gave for closing down Arcane Austin, the developers of Prey and backup developers on Dishonored. Yes, Arcane Leon is still in existence, but talk to a lot of people and Prey is the best Arcane game there is. I mean, it's not a completely unanimous opinion, but it's near that. Most people think Prey is a masterpiece who like that kind of game. Representatives of Microsoft say it was a strategic decision to consolidate resources, or that Bethesda did it, but that's all smoke and mirrors. Microsoft owns Bethesda, and Bethesda essentially forced Arcane Austin to develop Redfall. Redfall is another major live service failure story where an extremely good video game studio made something they didn't want to make, and it was clear because if you played it, you knew that nobody wanted this thing to exist, players or developers alike. It was clearly executives that wanted it to exist. By the time Redfall was released, 70% of the staff at Arcane Austin had just straight up left the studio. That's a big warning sign that nobody wanted to make the game. And here's the thing. Yes, you'll have some staff that isn't necessarily the most jazzed about every project of all time, but 7 out of every 10 people that worked at Arcane Austin found it unbearable enough to leave a dream job for a lot of these developers. People with passion, the people that developed Prey, talented, passionate people who liked what they did, were like, actually, you know what? I could go anywhere else. And they did. If the people behind the game don't think that the game's going to be fun, it's not going to be fun. It's also just a really simple truth that traditional video game development requires different skills. Your regular video game developer just can't transition into live service development without really just rebuilding the company. We've seen it repeatedly. Rocksteady Games is one of the best developers out there with an incredible, sterling track record. The Batman Arkham games. Do we need to say anything else? These are some of the most incredibly polished games with a clear vision, some of our favorite games of all time. And Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, ironically, just killed all that momentum. Like other live service failures we've discussed, the game stopped support before the end of the game. After a few updates, they pulled the plug and this really expensive flop was finally put out of its misery. It's not the first time a beloved developer was crushed by the challenges of live service development either, again at the behest of the demands for more money by these big publishers. BioWare barely survived Anthem and had to fight to cut all the live service elements from Dragon Age the Veilguard. Yes, that game could have been much, much worse than it was. It has its own rocky development history, but we can say with confidence the version of the game that came out was an improvement over the thing that EA wanted. One of our top-tier developers of all time, Platinum Games, were also almost crushed by Square Enix's Babylon's Fall. It's another game that was pulled completely from stores and is currently unplayable. Thankfully, Platinum got a second chance and made the absolutely phenomenal Ninja Gaiden 4. That game was funded by Xbox Game Studios to feed the Xbox Game Pass and its never-ending need for new content, but it's an example of if you pair the right developer with the right project, it can work. Forcing developers of single-player games to make quasi-multiplayer forever games, it's dangerous from a financial position. When one of these developers survives and comes back up from the live service dungeons, scarred or not, we're very thankful. We've talked a lot about the dangers of live service, but there's another player that's taking a lot of luster away from AAA developers. It's the AA developers, where the mid-budget games thrive. For a long time, we did not see many of these releases, but that was because these AAA publishers kind of owned all of that. As we've seen, they've kind of just given up on it, so the AA space kind of just was ripe for the picking, you know? People went in and got the good cherries, no pun intended. We'll talk about Team Cherry in a second, but mid-budget games are back at the forefront. Big successes like Clair Obscur are these much smaller scale, but still find a way to bring grandeur to it. Games like Korean and Chinese developers like Lies of P or Black Myth Wukong, those types of things, those feel like they're bigger budget games than they are. They're not on the level of a Call of Duty by any even vague stretch. And indie games on Steam are getting more attention than ever. I told you, Hollow Knight Silksong, it's the kind of huge moneymaker that publishers can only dream of. It's a game that captured the conversation for a very long time. And the interesting thing is, these publishers would likely never pay for the extremely long development time of Silksong, which is to the advantage of these much more interesting smaller developers. Like Team Cherry, they don't need to keep paying a staff of thousands. When game budgets for AAA games are ballooning to unnecessary levels, it's no surprise that publishers are looking for easier ways to make money. Game development is very, very hard. Making a single game that lasts for a long time and continually makes money as it exists sounds easier than making 10 games, and I think that's a lot of what's going on here. For an industry that's about having fun, developers are routinely required to work 80-hour weeks or longer to get their games made. Making one game instead of 10 maybe sounds like they might bypass that, because those 80-hour work weeks, I guarantee you that overtime ain't cheap. But the game industry is at a crossroads. A lot of people think single player is dead because a few industry analysts say that single player is dead. They're wrong, though. Single player games are everywhere. The AA space is growing, and there are just too many incredible indie games to even count. We can only hope that these big publishers learn the same lesson Hollywood is learning right now. Big budgets don't always equal big success. And before we wrap this up, I want to give you an example of somebody who proves it. Capcom. While everybody else has been panicking about the death of single player and playing the lottery every single day, hoping one day they'll hit it big and get a Fortnite going, Capcom doubled down on single player. They release focused, polished single-player games, and the results speak for themselves. Their market cap has grown more than tenfold over the last decade, and their revenue and profit lines have been stable, predictable, and up. They didn't chase trends, they didn't throw all their money into a live service money pit, and they didn't expand to an unsustainable team size. They just made good games that people actually wanted to buy. And the funny thing is, that works. If you make something worth buying, people will buy it, and you will make money. Often a lot of money, just not all of the money, and you'll have to make another thing that's worth buying next year or the year after. You won't be able to just sit on your ass and collect infinite money forever. You'll actually have to do things. I understand that's not appealing to an executive. But the thing about creative businesses, whether that's the games industry, books, movies, any kind of art, the only reason it's an industry in the first place is because everybody needs to be able to have the time to make these things, which means that people have to get paid for it. But once money starts changing hands, people who are not interested in art become interested in the business that's taking place around it. They don't understand that for that business to exist, people have to actually be satisfied sometimes. That's really what a lot of this really boils down to. The forever game has to almost satisfy you time and time again. You can't get closure, you shouldn't feel catharsis, and it can't end. Satisfied customers are repeat buyers. And eventually, if your business model revolves around not quite satisfying people, the people are gonna leave. And it's not a vote with your dollars type situation. That's not how things work. In order for this all to collapse, people have to understand that they're not going to get what they want out of this thing. And that is coming. And in the meantime, people who are making single-player games are taking advantage of literal catnip. If by some miracle a publisher is listening to this and you have a brain and can digest this information, think about this for a minute. You can make a lot of money by making a satisfying product. Yes, you'll have to make more than one. And no, you will not make all of the money in the world forever. But you will make no money. In fact, you will make negative money. You will sink money into a hole 99 times out of 100. If you chase the live service trend, you probably are going to fail. And it is proven that even though you don't grow to be the biggest goddamn thing in the world, you still grow and make tons of money by just making good games. You've got the entire AA industry, you've got the indie games industry, and you've got, like I said, a great example of a AAA like Capcom that has done nothing but single-player games and grown every step of the way. Just stop doing this shit. You can't all be Fortnite. You won't all be Fortnite. Most of you will not own a platform. Epic has more money than you can imagine, and they have not made a dent in Steam. And hell, they own platforms. The Unreal Engine and Fortnite are both technically platforms. Like, people use Unreal to make their games, and that makes Epic money. People use Fortnite not only for fun, but people make content with it. People rent their intellectual property to it, and they do these collaboration events, and it's this stuff. It's That's something you're not going to get. A lot of these companies were either first or entirely lucked into it. Why do AAA publishers hate single-player games? Because as Tears for Fears put it, everybody wants to rule the world. The problem with that is that's not how the world works. We all have a lot of different ideas about how the world should work. And my idea is probably very different from the idea that these people have. But it doesn't matter what I think or what they think, because the world works the way the world works now. Any input from Jim Ryan or myself will not change that. If you want to be in the games business, make games people want to play. You're not going to rule the world with that, but you'll do pretty damn good. If you're picking up what we're throwing down here, a lot of this came from discussions we have making The Falcon Show, our new members-only podcast. Now, some of it you can hear on the show, some of it happens around the show, but that's where a lot of what this is about came from. The Falcon Show is the first thing we're doing for our new 1% club. Now, that's kind of an ironic name. The 1% has always meant the elite, but we're kind of co-opting that a little bit, talking about how these executive types that this video has been very pointed at look at single-player gamers like we're some small segment of the population that shouldn't be paid attention to. We need to go out after naive fools and children who don't know any better, who will become addicted to our endless services. If you want in on our 1% Club and the Falcon Show, become a member today. We thank you so much. This has been and will continue to be a passion project. The single-player game space is what we really hold dear here at gameranx. And on that note, we want to know what you think. Leave us a comment. Let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.